And this has serial killer vibes as well, which, I just love that too. I know, I'm such a dark and messed up person. Here's a great book to do. So if you are more of kind of like on the horror creep out kind of a vibe with maybe a side of grief, London is the best city. Blah, 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 blah. The next book is Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be one that came directly from you guys, and it was a request to come up with a list of books, as you can tell by the title, about one of my favorite tropes, which is the reluctant return home. Having to confront the past, having to deal with a mystery in the past or people from your past, just having to go home again when you don't want to go home again. And then all the things that happen when you get there. So of course I was like, I can totally do that because it's one of my most favorite tropes. So duh, I want to share my favorite books with you guys. But then I was like, there's no way I haven't talked about this. Like there's just no way. So I went back through the archives and I'm super surprised that I haven't done an entire video committed to this because I have done a few trope videos. But back in the summer of 2019, I did do a favorite tropes, which included this and had a couple of recommendations, and I will link that video for you down below. But today we're gonna go all in on a whole bunch of books where people had to go home again and they maybe didn't want to, and then stuff happened. So the beauty of a video like this is that I get to not only talk to you guys about books that I love, but also I get to find the books on my shelf that fit the trope that I haven't read yet. I'm gonna start off by quickly talking about the two books I talked about in the first video. So the first one is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, and she is by far one of my most favorite authors ever, and I just wish she would write another book. But this is her first book, and while I do think Gone Girl is exceptional, this is also an exceptional book. So Camille is a journalist and she's living, I'm gonna say like outside of Chicago. And in her hometown, a few girls start to go missing and her editor basically assigns her the story and she has to go back. And she doesn't want to, but she has to. And it is sort of this dark, twisted story where she is investigating the missing girls and trying to find out what happened there. But she is also, of course, confronting all of her own demons, including confronting a super messed up relationship with her mother, a stepfather she doesn't really know, a stepsister, or half-sister, excuse me, that she doesn't know, who's a teenager now, and who knew the girls who went missing. And it's sort of the exploration of the family relationships, it's her own demons, it's her own dark past, what is she running from, what is she trying to escape? And it just hits every dark, messed up note it possibly could, and I loved it. And then the other book I talked about in that video is Megan Miranda's All the Missing Girls. And this is also the first Megan Miranda book that I read. And this one is also incredibly interesting in the fact that it's told backwards. So in this book, we have many years ago, a girl went missing. And then in present day, our main character has to come back because her father is sick. And no sooner is she there, but another girl goes missing. And people who she was friends with at the time are connected to the missing girl in the present, if you will. And again, it's told backwards from in the present day. But we get the mysteries of the past and the mysteries of the present connecting. And it's just, it was so interestingly well done. So our main character is home for 2 weeks. It starts on day 15, we go backwards to day number 1, and we piece together what happened in the past, present, there's family secrets, there's old wounds, there's just all sorts of stuff happening, and all of it is amazing. The next book I have is Riley Sager's Home Before Dark, and in this one, our main character, Maggie, lived at this house called Bainbury Hall when she was young, and she and her parents fled the house after like 3 weeks, because really, really strange things started to happen. And her dad winds up writing this best-selling book, which is kind of like the Amityville Horror, about all the ghosty, creepy, weird things that happened to them that drove them out of the house. And Maggie was like 5 years old and she doesn't really remember it. And she also basically thinks her dad made it all up. And many years later, when her dad passes away, he leaves her Bainbury Hall in his will. And she didn't know that they even had the house still. And her mom was like, don't do it. Just stay away, ignore your father. But Maggie's not gonna do that. She thinks it's all a bunch of like crap, basically. And she also happens to be a house flipper. So she goes back to the house, she's gonna fix things up, she's gonna get rid of that thing, and on she's gonna go with her life. But no sooner does Maggie get there, that weird things start to happen. And she starts to wonder, did Dad make it all up? Did this stuff really happen and I just don't remember it? So she's semi-reluctant to return home, but she goes home and man, do things start to happen. So this creeped me out. I read this one super quick. I raved about it in multiple videos. I love Riley Sager. Yes, Home Before Dark. The next book is Another Turn for Darkness, of course, and it's His and Hers by Alice Feeney. And in this book, not only do we get my hometown trope, we also get my dual POV trope, which I love. And in this one, we have Anna, who's a journalist, and she is just not on the best of terms at her job right now. So when a dead body shows up in her hometown and her boss assigns her the story to cover, she can't really say no. So back she goes, and then when she gets there, she sees that her ex-husband Jack is the inspector on the case. And we get both of their perspectives. Things are obviously not completely cool between the two of them. And as it says on the back, it says 3 words to describe my wife: beautiful, ambitious, unforgiving. I only need 1 word to describe my husband: liar. So it says, if there are 2 sides to every story, someone is always lying. And this is another book that I just whipped through. I totally loved it. I loved the past and the present weaving together. I loved the mysteries. I just love just dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things, and you get that in spades in this book. Next up is a book that I haven't read yet, and I have probably talked about it on here multiple times and put it on multiple TBRs and put it back on my shelf and never picked it up because, again, bad at this. And it's called Dead Letters, and this is by Kate Dolan Leach. And as you can tell by the hardcover version of this, this is a book that I just had to have. Had to have it. I remember buying it at Barnes & Noble. It was on that sort of new and mystery shelf when it came out a few years ago, when we could walk into Barnes & Noble and shop the new and mystery shelf. And I didn't read it. So this is about 2 twins. Well, they're twins, so obviously there's 2 of them. Hello. And it's Ava and Zelda. And their family owns a winery. And for some reason, Ava has she's left. Like, she can't deal with her mercurial sister, and I think her mom has a drinking problem. Absent father, romantic betrayal, failing vineyard, mother slipping into dementia, excuse me. And Ava has escaped to Paris, and she has a great life there, and she has a great boyfriend there, and she just has like put it all in her rearview mirror. But then she gets word that her sister Zelda has died, and she has to go home again. But the thing is, Ava doesn't totally believe that Zelda's dead, because apparently Zelda liked to play games and mess with her sister and mess with people, and supposedly she burned herself alive smoking a cigarette after she passed out in the barn. So I'm gonna guess no body was found. And no body, no crime? No body, no murder? No body, no accidental death? So Ava is back trying to figure out what exactly happened to her sister, and it sounds like her sister maybe is messing with her. Maybe she's playing a game, maybe she's not. And it just sounds like multiple timelines. This is one of those books on Goodreads where people either like love it or hate it, but it just sounds like so good and dark and twisty, which I love. So maybe this is the time I'm actually going to read it. Another one of my all-time fave authors and books is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. And this book is also just filled with darkness in all the best ways, and I love it. And in this book, we have a woman named Geo, and when she was in high school, she was best friends with this girl, Angela, and this guy named Kaiser. And Angela went missing when they were in high school, and they never found her body. They never found out what happened to her, just gone one night. And 14 years later, her body has been found in the woods near Geo's house. And this renowned serial killer has been tied to her murder. And this renowned serial killer, back in the day, was Geo's boyfriend. And this is all front cover flat stuff, so I'm not ruining anything for you guys. And all these years, Geo knew exactly what happened to her best friend. So Geo is just getting out of prison, and she winds up having to return to her hometown, even though she had been living in Seattle. She was engaged to this fabulous man. She had this fabulous career, but obviously being connected to a murder and going to jail kind of ruined all of that. So she's forced to come home again, and things just start to happen to her. And her past obviously has caught up to her at this point. And there's a lot of people who aren't jazzed about her being home again. And as if that's not bad enough, more bodies start showing up. So I loved this book, and it made me uncomfortable, and it made me angry, and it freaked me out, and it made me root for people, and it's definitely unlikable people doing unlikable things, but it also made me 110% fall in love with Jennifer Hillier as a writer for just her commitment to going all in to writing a story. Loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. Can't recommend it enough. Definitely super dark, so be ready to go deep. But this is just tremendous. So if you are not down for the darkness, I also have London is the Best City in America by Laura Dave. And in this book, this is very contemporary fiction, kind of a few days in someone's life, slice of life kind of a book. And it's small, but it packs a lot of punch. And our main character, Emmy, has been living in Rhode Island for the past couple of years. And she is, I want to say, I don't know if she's like mid or late 20s. And she has to come home to New York for her brother's wedding. And man, does she not want to come back here, because she has ended things with her fiance, which she doesn't want to tell her family about. Her career is kind of like eh. And the last thing she wants to do is spend a weekend smiling with all of her friends and family at her brother's wedding, celebrating somebody else being happy when she's kind of basically not. But what happens in this book is, over the course of this kind of like long weekend for the wedding, she comes home and her brother confesses to her that he's kind of getting some cold feet and not quite sure if he wants to get married. So it's very much about the exploration of them as brothers and sisters. It's about both of them sort of searching for their happy ending and are you marrying the right person and how you know if you're with the right person. And they literally go on a bit of a road trip and search for answers. I tabbed this book so much. I feel like you can't even tell how much I tabbed up this book. Oh, maybe you can from that angle. But I just loved it. It reminded me of the Marion Keyes books and sort of all of those books that I loved when I was in my 20s, that I could relate to and that I understood when I was feeling lost, or I didn't feel like I was in the right relationship, or was I ever gonna find the right relationship? And even reading it at an older age, I still very much enjoyed it. And part of the reason why I enjoyed it so much is it does take place in a part of New York that I'm familiar with, so I also enjoyed the sentimental feeling of it, and they're in a small town, and I grew up in a small town. I just thought it was a great, just sort of like heartwarming but real and relatable. I'm sure I cried when I read this one too. It was just a great, solid, fun, feel-good read. The next book I have is called Girls Like Us, and this is by Christina Alger. And in this book, we have an FBI agent, Nell, and she has to come home to her family's house out on Long Island because her dad has died in a motorcycle accident. And her mom was brutally murdered many years ago when she was young. So Nell is the only person in the family, basically. So she comes home to spread her dad's ashes and kind of close up the house and close up his estate, and then plans to return to her life. And while she is there, she gets pulled into an investigation that her dad was actually working on about girls who were going missing out on Long Island. And she basically starts to work with his partners at the police force, who she's known since she was a kid too. And she kind of can't resist getting involved in things, and then things start to happen because somebody doesn't want her involved. I don't think you specifically get dual timelines, but we do obviously get some flashbacks to the past and sort of how her mother's death affected her. And there were always questions about, you know, did her father have a part in her mother's murder? And it's a lot of complicated relationships, and, you know, obviously she kind of got the heck out of town. So now that her father has passed away, there's those feelings of regret and grief, and there's all sorts of complicated layers, but then you have a police investigation going on at the same time as well. So I really enjoyed this book. This was one that I was highly looking forward to. I had a really good time with it. I'm very interested to read more of Christina Alger's as well. So if you're looking for police detective, return to home investigative, you get heavy investigation in this one might be the book for you. Now, if you are someone who likes more of kind of like that horror creep out vibe of things with maybe a side of grief, I would try The Shadow Friend by Alex North. And in this book, our protagonist Paul comes home because his mom is not doing so well, and she's had to move out of her house and go into kind of an assisted living. She had a fall. So he is back living in his childhood home, and 25 years ago, when Paul was a teenager, his friend Charlie brutally murdered somebody. brutally murdered somebody and then was never seen again. Never caught, never heard from, never seen, ever again. And as fate would have it, now in the present day, someone is doing some copycat killing to Charlie. So Paul is kind of drawn into the investigation in the sense that he knew Charlie and perhaps knew things about what happened back in the day. And he also has to confront what happened back in the day in his relationship with Charlie. So you get some past and present, you get some extremely creepy things that happen in this one. The opening description of the murder scene is a lot to swallow, so just push through that. And if you don't want to push through that, this is probably not the book for you. But this is a book that 100% creeped me out, but also kind of made me cry. And not in like a scared way, but in an emotional, I didn't see this coming, why am I crying right now kind of a way. But I just loved it. It's my first Alex North, and it sort of hit all the spots for me, so I'm excited to see more of what he does. Another non-murdery book is Watermelon by Marian Keyes. And this is her first book. And I haven't read this in forever, but I've talked about Marian Keyes on this channel before, and I just adore her, and I adore her stories. And she writes these just rich, complicated, funny, relatable characters, and she weaves just sort of a lightness and a darkness in the sense of reality in her books. And I don't mean darkness in a murdery kind of a way, but in a complicated family relationships, complicated romantic relationships. She writes about addiction, she writes about depression, she writes about grief, and she weaves all of it in with great humor and great wit and just really engaging, interesting characters. And in this book, we are introduced to the Walsh family, and this group of sisters winds up making either cameos in future books or get a book all of their own to them. So you can start anywhere with Marian Keyes, but if you're going in, you might as well start at the beginning. And in this one, it is about Claire Walsh. And on the day she gives birth to her first child, her husband James tells her he's been having an affair and now is the right time to leave her. So she is forced to move back in with her parents. So there's our reluctant return to home. And her parents are super supportive, but her sisters don't quite get it. So it is about failed relationships. It is about the relationship, again, with her parents, the sisterhood between all of them. I want to say there's 5 Walsh sisters. And then dealing with her husband leaving her and the betrayal of all that, and what happens when he comes crawling back and tries to fix things and wants to have Claire return to him and forgive him. It's just really funny, and it's a lot about, you know, her future and the life you thought you were going to have and what happens when that life implodes. And now she's a single mother, and how do you deal with the betrayal? And, you know, do you go back to the life you had? Do you strike out on your own? Where do you get your support from? You know, how your family shows up for you, and just sort of questioning everything. And again, just loved it. So the next book I have is another unread book off of my own shelf, and it's called A Good Killing by Alison Leota. And I'm just gonna read the back of this one for you guys. And this is another book about sisters. And in this one we have a prosecutor named Anna, and she has to go back to her hometown outside of Detroit because she is newly single, having called off her wedding. She's not home to kind of lick her own wounds, but she's come home because her sister Jody has been wrongfully accused of murder after their old high school coach, a local hero, dies in a suspicious car crash. It says, but maybe Jody isn't so innocent after all. So it sounds like the police think Jody was having an affair with the married coach, and she killed him out of jealousy. Anna starts to investigate. She hooks up with an old childhood friend named Cooper, and he has some sort of secrets of his own, and they slowly peel back the facade of her all-American town and discovers that no one is telling the truth about the coach, not even the people she thought she knew best. So it says, A Good Killing is a pulse-pounding story about the limits of vigilante justice, the bonds of sisterhood, and the price of truth that will have readers spellbound until its shocking end. I don't know why I haven't picked this up, because it sounds like all sorts of things that I love, and I'll let you guys know when I actually do read it. The next book is another one that I have read fairly recently, and it is Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen McManus. And in this book, it's a little bit of a twist on the trope in that we have 2 teenage twins, and their mom has to go to rehab, so they wind up having to go to her hometown to live with their grandmother while mom is in rehab. And the hitch is their mom left the town basically right after high school graduation and never looked back. So this is all new to the two of them. And one of the reasons why their mom left is because her sister went missing all those years ago. Sort of left the library one night and was never seen from again. And then 5 years ago, a girl was murdered, high school senior. And now in present day, girls are going missing again. So the question is the killer back? Because the killer from 5 years ago was never found. Her sister's disappearance from back in the day was never solved. And these two wind up sort of confronting and uncovering their mother's secrets rather than their mother coming back and confronting the secrets. So if all that makes sense to you guys, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was fun. It was a really quick read. I really enjoyed it. It was dual points of view. You get some past and present just sort of as things are revealed. And I just had a fun time with it. So easy, quick read, good time, twist on the trope. There you go. Next up is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. And this is kind of mystery with some romantic elements to it, I would say. And in this one, Sydney has, I want to say she's like been living in Seattle, and she winds up having to return home to Brooklyn because of family stuff. And when she gets back, she realizes how much her neighborhood has changed. And gentrification has basically hit this neighborhood hard. And in a bit of a weird way, in that neighbors she's known for years, people who have lived in the community for decades, kind of just pack up and leave one night. They don't say goodbye, there's no explanation. And there's sort of all these young, rich, white people who start to move into the town. And something doesn't feel quite right to Sydney. I didn't love this book as much as a lot of other people did. And for me, the reason was I wanted like thriller, twisty, dark, and there was a lot of that. But there was a big romantic element to this, which I didn't need, nor was I interested in. And I felt like it distracted from the good, solid, twisty, dark mystery part of it. And if you have heard anything about this, this book is comped to a couple of movies. And I will say if you have seen those movies, you kind of know where this book is going. But I enjoyed the thriller part of it. I know Alyssa Cole is a romance writer first and foremost, so this is her first foray into thriller. So I really loved Sydney as a character. I loved where the book was going. I just found the romance to be distracting. And I loved the neighborhood, and I loved the people who've been there for years, and I liked her pursuit of trying to figure out what was what. So I wish we had just sort of stayed on the mystery track. And like, it's fine if she had like a sidekick or a best friend or someone helping her along. I just didn't need him. And I think part of the reason why is I didn't like Theo, who is our love interest, as a character. So take that for what it is. Lots of people enjoyed this. I do, again, I really enjoyed the mystery thriller part of it. Just know there's romance to it if that's your if that is or isn't your thing, I would say. And yes, so there you go. And Brooklyn, again, another New York story, which I love. The next book is one that is on my wish list, and this is The Liar's Girl by Catherine Ryan Howard. And Catherine Ryan Howard has been on my radar for quite a few months now. So I've heard about Rewind. I've heard about The Nothing Man, which I think is her newest book. And I don't know which one to start with because I didn't actually realize that this has like a hometown return vibe to it. So I'm just gonna read the blurb for you guys. So this one also has serial killer vibes to it, which is like, how much more dark and messed up could I be, you guys? I appreciate that you enjoy that I am. But in this one, we have Allison, and when she was a freshman at St. John's College, there also happened to be a prolific serial killer murdering people and drowning them in the muddy waters of the Grand Canal. And Allison fell in love with this guy, Will, and everything was great, and her world was fabulous. But then her best friend, Liz, became a victim of this murderer. And it turns out that murderer is Will. So her boyfriend was the serial killer. So he got caught. He's like locked away in a psychiatric hospital. And I think it's been like 20 years. Allison fled to the Netherlands and like never looked back. Can't blame her. But now a young woman's body has been found in the canal. And the police go to question Will to see what he knows about it. Because is it a copycat killing? Is he in touch with someone? Like, what is happening? So Will tells them that he has something new to confess, but there's only one person he's prepared to confess it to. And like, you guessed it, it's Allison. She doesn't want to be pulled back. So reluctantly, bing, 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 buzzword, she returns to the city she hasn't set foot in for more than a decade to face the man who murdered the woman she was supposed to become, only to discover that until now, Will has left out the worst part of all. So, bum, bum, bum. This is like just shy of 4 stars on Goodreads. I need to get on the Catherine Ryan Howard train, and maybe we'll start there. So that's gonna do it for today's video. Let me know if you guys know of other books with this trope, because obviously I've probably just barely scratched the surface, and I'm always looking for more. And if you guys have read any of the books that I talked about today that I haven't read, let me know which one you think I should read first, because it's time to discover a new hometown reluctance story, I think. So thank you guys for hanging out today and spending part of your time with me. I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.